Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our council session for today, March 12th, and we're going to begin with a moment of silence. Please stand as you're able. Thank you very much. And so we have a number of presentations. We're going to start with a proclamation recognizing National Agricultural Day by Councilmember Friedson, joined by Councilmembers Rice and myself.
Good morning. For those farmers who are with us here today, good midday. Everybody who's here for Agricultural Day, if you could come on up and join us, please. Great to be here with the council president and with Council Member Rice. So we are all three honored to be able to represent our agricultural community today as part of Ag Day, and it is a profound honor for me to represent, as the new council member in District 1, part of our critical agricultural reserve. In 1980, Montgomery County made one of the most important and impactful land use decisions in the history of the United States in our dedication and commitment to the agricultural reserve. And today we have the folks who prove to us every day just how important and how significant that land use decision was. Our agricultural heritage in Montgomery County isn't just about where we were and where we have been, but it's about where we are. And the folks who are standing with us today make such a huge impact on our economy, on the food we eat, and on all of the different things that they do to improve our quality of life, proving that building a sustainable future isn't just about our environment, it's about our economy. And so I am honored to be here with my colleagues, honored to recognize them. And with that, I'd like to turn to my friend and colleague, Craig Rice, to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And, I'm kind of wondering what's happening with all the farms, because all the farmers seem to be here behind us. I'm a little bit concerned. If we hear reports about horses and cows running amok in the county, we'll know why. Let me just start off by saying how important this is from a personal standpoint. And I know many of the farmers behind me have asked about my mother, who I know is watching. It's one of those where growing up and understanding the heritage of sharecropping that was deep in my family, and then being able to go every summer and see the farm that we had in South Carolina gave me an appreciation and understanding for how important farming is and how important sustainability is for our future. And it's one of the reasons why I now make sure that I take my girls to see that farm as well, so that they understand where they came from, but more importantly, where we still need to be. As we care about the environment and climate change, we need to be serious about making sure that we have sustainable farming. And our farms here do a great job of being stewards of our environment. They are vested in making sure that our environment is healthy, because if it's not, they're out of business. And it's important that folks understand and realize that they are true partners with us when it comes to this overall effort. And so I just really want to thank them for the devotion that they have made to making sure that we continue to have a prosperous future when it comes to farming, but then also what you're doing to make sure that you're sustaining our environment as well. Two very equally important priorities for us here in Montgomery County, and that we need to hold up and value. So thank you, guys.
Well, good morning, farmers. It's very important for us to host this recognition. I often share that, when I first came to the United States at age 10, I came to Rolla, Missouri, and then I came back at age 17 to go to college to Columbia, Missouri. And I spent a lot of time with, farmers and their farms, et cetera, because I had a lot of friends whose parents owned farms. But then when I talk to people about Montgomery County and how we're so close to Washington, D.C., and I talk about our agricultural reserve and our farmers, I get this puzzled look because, people think of Montgomery County only as a place where you have residential neighborhoods and you have a lot of emerging urban centers. But the reality is that this is what makes Montgomery County so extraordinary, is the fact that we have so many different types of neighborhoods and so many different industries that are here, all coexisting. And so it is important every year to remind all of us of this extraordinary gift that we have, this very unique feature that we have here in Montgomery County. And I have to say I'm very proud that I have been able to serve with colleagues who understand issues of sustainability and what we need to do constantly to ensure that we keep this as a vibrant component of our county. So thank you for everything that you continue to do every single day. And most importantly, I think for us is really exposing our young people, our students, to this amazing feature in Montgomery County so they can also look into farming and understand that sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability is possible. So thank you and congratulations for everything that you do.
Great, and if we could have Jeremy Chris come up and introduce everybody who's with us today, I'd appreciate it. This is a test, although his job is not dependent on the outcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here. I work in the Office of Agriculture, and the folks that stand behind me and beside me are really my clients, and I'm really blessed to be able to work with the agricultural community. And at this point, I've been asked to introduce everybody we have here, so here it goes. All right, so we first are going to start over here. Rick Walter, raise your hand when I call your name. He's the Director of Extension. We got Tim McGrath here. He's on the Farm Bureau. Mike Scheffel, he's the Administrator for Farmland Preservation. Robert Butts from Wardaca. Going across the back, Pam Saul from Rolling Acres Farm. Lonnie Luther from L&M Farm. Lonnie's also the first Vice President of the Farm Bureau. Todd Greenstone, he's the second Vice President. Angie McNally, she's a member of the Ag Advisory Committee. Michelle Kropp, she's the president of the Farm Bureau. Pete Driscoll, he's on the Ag Advisory Committee representing horticulture. Doug Lecklider, he's the chair of the Ag Advisory Committee. Michael Jamison, he's the chair of the Ag Preservation Board. We got John Fendrick from Woodbourne Creamery. And John Zalotowski, he's our Soil Conservation District Manager. Wade Butler from Butler's Orchard, also the chair of the MAP, Montgomery Ag Producers. Doug Trigoning, he's the agronomy educator working with Extension. Bob Sissel, he's the executive director of MAP, also a member of Ag Preservation Board. Jane Evans, she's on Ag Advisory Committee. We've got Jane Siegler, she's a former member of the Ag Advisory Committee, former president of the Maryland Horse Council. And behind her is the current president of the Maryland Horse Council, that's Neil Agate. And then we got Tyler Butler from Butler's Orchard and Jessica Simpson, is that right? Because I've never met you. Okay, from Madison Fields. Ben. Oh, Ben. Sorry. I'm sorry. One mistake. And one. Ben Butler. Ben Butler from Butler's Orchard.
Good job. I don't know about you, but I am impressed. That was probably the most talented display that has ever happened in this moment. And I hope that the county executive, as he's figuring out his last-minute decisions of his budget, just watched that display from our Office of Agriculture. With deepest gratitude for allowing us to eat the fruits of your labor up here and those you're representing each and every day, both figuratively and literally. I'm going to read this proclamation here with my colleagues. The Montgomery County Council, Maryland proclamation, whereas 2019 will mark the 46th anniversary of National Agriculture Day, created in 1973 to recognize and celebrate America's agricultural industry and to increase public awareness of agriculture's role in our society. And
whereas agriculture provides us with most everything we eat, wear, or use daily, including contributing to fuel and other bioproducts, and as the world population continues to increase, there is an even greater demand for production of these products in the United States. And
whereas during National Agricultural Day and every day, we all should understand how food, fiber, and renewable products are produced. value how critical agricultural is in maintaining a strong economy and promote career opportunities in agricultural industries. And
whereas the Montgomery County Agricultural Reserve is 93,000 acres of protected farmland and open space that is home to 550 farms and 350 horticultural enterprises and a growing equine industry. And
whereas the businesses in the Agricultural Reserve contribute more than $287 million annually to the economy. I think I need to repeat that. Whereas the businesses in the Agricultural Reserve contribute more than $287 million annually to the economy in agricultural products and operation and employ more than 10,000 residents. And
whereas the Office of Agriculture was created to support and promote our agricultural industry in Montgomery County, as clearly evidenced here today. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby recognizes March 14th, 2019, as National Agriculture Day, and be it further resolved that the council encourages all residents to honor farmers and those in the agricultural industry for the vital role they have in our economy and to support the continuation of our county's farming heritage and farming culture. Presented on this 12th day of March in the year 2019 and signed by myself, the council president, and Councilmember Rice. Congratulations.
So on behalf of the agricultural community, we want to thank the County Council for this opportunity to acknowledge National Agriculture Day and the importance of agriculture in Montgomery County. Thank you very much.
And by the way, the mic drop earlier was slightly delayed. The staging had that right after Mr. Chris had gotten everybody right. We just were slightly delayed on that, and I apologize. It's my fault. But if our colleagues could stand up in the back, and we're going to take a group picture here to honor our friends in the agriculture industry.
very good. So now I'm going to present the proclamation, and this is recognizing MS Awareness Week. And so I will be presenting this. Good morning again. And so we are here. I think it's so incredibly important for us to every year present also this proclamation and understand that the real purpose of this week is not only to bring awareness, to help encourage funding for research to help find a cure, but also to highlight the strength and bravery of the individuals and their families who deal with this truly insidious disease. There are approximately 1 million people diagnosed with this disease. Scientists believe it is caused by an identified environmental factor in a person who is genetically predisposed to respond, but an exact cause has yet to be determined. Life expectancy for individuals with MS has increased over time. Medical advances and therapeutic treatments have helped, but for many people, there is no cure. MS can range in severity. There are a range of symptoms that can affect individuals in different ways and make diagnosis difficult because symptoms can overlap with those of other diseases and conditions. It is very scary, it's a very scary thought to know that something is wrong, but not to know exactly what that something is. According to the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, 2.3 million people are affected by MS worldwide. However, because the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention does not require you as physicians to report new cases, and because symptoms are sometimes invisible, we can only estimate the prevalence of this disease in the United States. This is why it's so important to bring awareness to this disease, to move the conversation forward on not only funding research and celebrating the brave men and women that persevere with this disease every day, but to also bring awareness to the fact that there are not enough tools in our toolkit to combat this disease. And it is important to highlight that, it seems like almost every day I hear of someone, especially young people, who are struggling and dealing with this disease. And so it is, I think, so very important for us every year to invite Dr. Seth Morgan, who is the chair of Commission of Peoples with Disability. We have people like Carl Prather, who recently has been named as the Maryland Advocate of the Year by the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, Hillary Kaplan, Kathleen Kolar, Marina Baudouin, to tell us a little bit about what it is that we can do, what it is that we should be highlighting in terms of advocacy, especially for funding and especially for expanding many of those clinical trials and different kinds of innovative treatment protocols so that more and more people can participate. So I'm going to read the proclamation and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Morgan so we can share with us a little bit more of his own experience as well as his extraordinary advocacy here in the county. Whereas multiple sclerosis is a neurological disease of the central nervous system affecting at least 2.3 million people worldwide and approximately 1 million people in the United States. And whereas MS generally strikes people between ages 20 through 50. And the cause and course of this often debilitating disease remains unknown and no cure currently exists. And whereas the National Multiple Sclerosis Society has invested more than $1 billion in groundbreaking research at the best medical center, universities, and other institutions throughout the United States and abroad, striving to achieve a world free of MS and heightening public knowledge about MS. And whereas Montgomery County, Maryland recognizes the importance of early diagnosis and treatment of MS as the cure for this disease is sought, expresses its appreciation for the dedication that the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, Greater DC, Maryland chapter has shown towards creating a world free of MS. Now therefore do we, Mark Elrich, who couldn't be here today, County Executive, and myself, Nancy Navarro, as County Council President, hereby proclaim March 10th to 16, 2019 as Multiple Sclerosis Awareness Week. In Montgomery County, we encourage all of our residents to learn more about multiple sclerosis and what they can do to support individuals with MS and their families. And it's signed by County Executive Elrich and myself. Dr. Morgan, let me give this to you.
I'm going to actually pass this back.
Yes,
if you don't mind.
of
Thank you. Hard to do things with too many hands, holding a cane as well. Thank you very much. As many people who attend these meetings knows, this is a yearly event for us and for me personally. And the reason for that is that MS is, it averages 2 years between the onset of symptoms and actually diagnosing the person with the MS. And those are 2 years that you've lost the potential to treat and hopefully forestall the worsening. And if you can find the right medication for that individual, that'll keep them in the workforce longer, that'll make them less dependent on the rest of society. And it's important to understand that this is a disease, as you pointed out, of young adults most frequently. Obviously, there are people at either end of the spectrum, but generally it has onset between the ages of 20 and 50. And part of the problem with the diagnosis is that there's no one test that makes the diagnosis of MS. It is a disease that is diagnosed based on symptoms and based on some testing results, but not ones that are frequently used in routine general medical care. The issue with MS diagnosis is I think we've all probably had the experience of hearing, at least, if not we haven't heard it personally, of a physician who is, it's a very confusing disease for the physicians as well. And they say, it's psychosomatic, it's all in your head. Well, it is not all in your head, it's in your head and in your spinal column, because it is a disease of the central nervous system. And many of the symptoms are not typical of other diseases. It may be anxiety, it may be, gee, I'm having trouble remembering things. Oh, you're just nervous, don't worry about that. And getting treatment started is essential, because if you, as you said, there's no cure. But if you find a medication that forestalls the worsening, we just are able to do it. And there's still that average 2 years between onset of symptoms and diagnosis. And that's 2 years that you could have had some impact on the progression of the disease. And I wanted to emphasize one other point. The MS Society has invested more than 1 billion, B with a B, in research because they are, obviously we can't depend on them to do all the research, but they are committed to finding this cure as well, and we all hope that they will. So I'm giving you my pitch because I want to reach that one person who is having trouble with symptoms and their doctor isn't quite understanding why. Think about MS, because it is a disease that is complicated even for physicians to make. So thank you very much to the County Council and the County Executive for this proclamation, and I'll see you again next year.
Yes, indeed. All right. We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Of course, and I think we're going to take a photo, and I'd like to ask my colleagues to stand up. Stand here. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a very special recognition, and this is recognizing Chief Manger for his 15 years of exemplary service as police chief here in Montgomery County, and Council Vice President Katz, Chair of the Public Safety Committee, will be joining me.
It's much more fun on this side.
Hi, Nancy. How are you? Good to see you. Thank you. Good morning, Chief. Thank you.
All right, so first, I would like to thank, on behalf of the over 1 million residents of Montgomery County, I want to thank Chief Manger for his 15 years of service here in Montgomery County. His retirement comes after a career spanning 42 illustrious years of police work, which is amazing. Chief Manger has exemplified what it means to be a public servant here in our county and nationally. He has been resolute in combating crime while maintaining strong outreach in the community. His leadership is reflected in the many awards he has won, including the Law Enforcement Award for the Brady Campaign to End Violence and the Keeper of the Dream Award from the National Immigration Forum. Under Chief Manger's watch, this county has become a safer and more welcoming place, successfully incorporating new technologies in law enforcement and public safety, and embracing public engagement strategies. Chief Manger's successor will have a high ethical and professional bar to meet. On behalf of myself, my council colleagues, and of course, the over 1 million residents in Montgomery County, I do want to thank Chief Manger for his dedicated service to our residents and wish him the best as he begins his next chapter in life. Chief Manger, you will be missed. I can say that. I want to turn it over to my colleague, Council Vice President Katz.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and congratulations, Chief. You know, when you decided to retire, which is, for those, I mean, everybody realizes how difficult a job this is. You know, people talk about a job that's 24/7. This is 25/8. I mean, you're constantly on. There's always a crisis that has to be solved, and the chief would be involved. But when you decided to retire, I looked at the history of Montgomery County again, and I realized that of most of the police chiefs who have been chiefs, now it started in 1922, so that's just a little bit before I was born. But I've actually known about half of the police chiefs that have been a chief in Montgomery County. And I have to tell you, all of them, every one of them were fine people, but none of them were finer and did a better job than you did. It is truly remarkable. I don't know what we're going to do. Any of you who have ever been to retirement for a police officer, and they can be very funny. They can be pretty brutal, too. They're pretty brutal in the person that they talk to because they give them pretty good zings. But the chief is the MC for most of those events in Montgomery County. So I don't know how any other police officer can retire unless the chief comes back and does the MC. I mean, you know as well as I do that it really is quite a comical and an enjoyable day. But Chief, on behalf of a very, very a community that truly does appreciate all that you did. And of course, none of us know 100% of what you did because we weren't with you all the time. But I can tell you, our community was a much better place because of what your involvement was. We have a proclamation.
Yes, indeed. All right. Whereas Chief J. Thomas Manger is retiring after 15 years of dedicated service, leading more than 1,300 Montgomery County law enforcement officers and a distinguished 42-year career in law enforcement, which began in Fairfax County, Virginia. And whereas Chief Manger's 4-decade career in law enforcement earned him numerous awards and recognition from the community, including the Silver Medal of Valor, the Fairfax County Human Rights Commission Award, the NAACP's Community Service Leadership Award, the James S. Brady Law Enforcement Award, the Youth Leadership Foundation's Community Champion Award, the Montgomery County Victims' Rights Foundation Public Safety Award, the Anti-Defamation League's Gorowitz Institute Service Award, the National Immigration Forum's Keeper of the Dream Award. In 2012, he was inducted into the Montgomery County Human Rights Hall of Fame. And whereas Chief Manger is a graduate of the FBI National Academy, the National Executive Institute, the Police Executive Leadership School at the University of Richmond, and the Senior Executive Institute at the University of Virginia, and also completed Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School's Program for State and Local Government, and
Whereas Chief Manger will now have enough time to distribute the Montgomery Magazine, May-June 2012 edition, where he was featured on the front cover, becoming the highest circulated edition ever after the chief bought every copy in print. The closest he got to achieving his dream of becoming a famous thespian, and whereas the county may now be able to sever its ties with a popular beverage company due to our diminished need for a never-ending supply of Diet Coke.
very important points. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the County Council, Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby honors Chief J. Thomas Manger, and be it further resolved that the County Council recognizes Manger's exceptional service, distinguished career, and commitment to public safety in protection and service to the residents, families, and businesses of Montgomery County. Presented on this 12th day of March in the year 2019, signed by myself, Nancy Navarro, Council President, and Sidney Katz, Council Vice President. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I know you have a couple of those. Yeah, thanks. So do I get to speak?
It's your turn.
No, you don't get to speak. No, go ahead.
So thank you to all of the council. I'm very appreciative of this proclamation. Even more appreciative of the Diet Coke. It's tough to know what to say. I recall over 15 years ago when I was appointed by then County Executive Doug Duncan, and I had been the police chief in Fairfax County for 6 years at the time, and a reporter asked me, so what's the biggest difference between being the chief in Fairfax and now being the chief of Montgomery County? And my response was that that since my parents lived in Silver Spring, that having my mother as a constituent was going to be the biggest difference. So I will tell you that it was a great decision to come back to Montgomery County. I grew up here in Silver Spring and went to Blair High School with the Go Blazers, so it was really a great pleasure for me to come back and serve here. I have to tell you that when I got here, I thought, well, I'll do 5 or 6 years, and then we'll see what's next. And so now, here 15 years later, I have to tell you that I don't feel like I'm an outsider. I mean, this is my department. This will always be my department. I have a great affection for Montgomery County and the work that everybody in county government does here. And so this is a great honor, and I'm very appreciative to all the council members for this recognition.
Okay, so now we're on to general business. Ms. Lamarcy, any announcements?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. The council will hold public hearings on the FY20 operating budget on April 8th, 9th, and 10th at 7 p.m. and April 8th and 10th at 1:30 p.m. Persons wishing to testify may sign up beginning on March 18th. Council is also still seeking applicants for the Montgomery County Planning Board, 2 vacancies that will be up in June. The deadline for application is April 24th at 5 p.m. There is an addendum this morning, a small correction. The WSSC CIP work session will review the FY20 to 25 budget, and the council did not receive any petitions this week.
Thank you. Also, the minutes of February 7th, 25th, 26th, and 28th were distributed to my colleagues. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, those are approved. And now we're on to consent calendar. I need a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Council Vice President Katz, second by Councilmember Rice. And there's one light, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I wanted to highlight items G and H. And this was a decision by our Montgomery County School Board to ensure that Seneca Valley High School and the expansion of career and college ready and career technical education programs would be expanded throughout the county. That commitment was still being met. And so I really want to thank them for their efforts in rearranging funds to ensure that this brand new high school will be built and will be able to support our children throughout the county who want to go in different career pathways. This wasn't an easy decision for them. I know, as I was just at John F. Kennedy High School on Friday, that many of our schools continue to struggle, whether it's restroom renovations, roof replacements, and other life cycle assessment asset replacements need to be done. But I also feel as though securing the future of our children when it comes to making sure that programs are speaking to the various needs that they have is also incredibly important. And so again, I just want to give accolades to them for forward thinking and keeping the commitment to the Seneca Valley High School community and the greater Up-County community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman Rice. I don't see any more lights, so all those in favor of approving the consent calendar, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a work session on the FY19 capital budget and amendments to the FY20 to 25 capital improvements program. And I also wanted to note that we will be taking straw votes because final votes are taken in May when we work through our budget. Okay, so with that first, we'll turn it over to the chair of the T&E committee, Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everybody. Everybody's getting seated. For those of you new to this exciting annual budget review process, the county looks to WSSC, yes, whether you knew it or not, to propose capital budget programs that strike a balance between making the necessary investments to keep our infrastructure in good repair and to ensure long-term stability of our water and sewer systems, balancing that with the impact on our constituents, the ratepayers. On February 7th, we had a very good T&E committee session, work session with General Manager Carla Reed and many other staff from WSSC to discuss their proposed 20 to 25 CIP. We approved the CIP unanimously, and we recommend its approval now by the full council. Overall, the proposed capital budget has a small decrease in the 6-year total, but increased funding for several individual projects that have been important to us in recent years, like complying with the consent decree at the Potomac Water Filtration Plant, replacing aging large pipes and blue planes. I note that we'll be back soon enough, as the Council President mentioned, to discuss WSSC's operating budget as well. It was just transmitted on March 1st, and it assumes a 5% rate increase, which is consistent with the guidelines adopted by both the Montgomery County Council and the Prince George's County Council, while WSSC debuts its new billing through the tiers rate structure that we've all eagerly awaited. Let me just mention, Ms. Reed, an operating issue that many of our constituents are also concerned about as you implement smart meters. I mentioned this during the committee work session. I think many of us understand the potential benefits of implementing smart meters for cost savings and water conservation. But I really want to make sure that WSSC in the future offers an opt-out to our ratepayers, just like every other utility we can find in the state of Maryland. They've become accustomed to that with electric utilities, BG&E as well, and I really hope you can make include that in your planning. So with that, I'll turn it over now to our very capable council staff, Keith Levchenko.
We have a number of WSSC folks here. If they want to make a couple of comments about the CIP in general before we get into any details.
Good morning, Council President Navarro. Excuse my changed voice today, and council members and Committee Chair Hucker. We are pleased to be here today to show you a very modest budget, a budget that reflects the most urgent needs of our sanitary district as well as obligations, meaning our regulatory obligations. And so with us here today, we have our commissioners, our commission chair, Eloise Foster, then we have Commissioner Dennis, Commissioner Fausto Bayonet, as well as our CFO, Patty Callahan, and Mark Brackett, who's in charge of our capital budget. So I'll turn it back over to our chair or to Keith.
As Mr. Hucker mentioned, this budget actually has a slight decrease in it, and that's even including what we call the information-only projects, which are infrastructure projects that don't technically meet the state definition for CIP. Counting all that, we still are seeing about a 3.3% decrease. A lot of that is because we've had some very large ticket projects that have been moving through construction. And we don't have similar large projects moving into the CIP at the moment. The Potomac Consent Decree project was mentioned earlier. There are still negotiations going on with the state. We do expect that project to go up in cost, although it's not likely to affect FY20. So we expect to see that project come back after they've concluded their negotiations, and we can address that in the next CIP or an amendment to this one if absolutely necessary. So we do expect an increase in that. But a lot of the other projects you're seeing here are relatively marginal increases in some projects, and as I mentioned, some of the larger projects are completing. So this is not quite as dramatic a CIP as we've seen in the past. It still represents a substantial infrastructure investment. It is consistent with the spending control limits discussion from last fall that the council had in terms of debt and debt service. And as you know, that still represents a major portion of the operating budget for WSSC. So the CIP is something we need to keep an eye on and try to, as WSSC has done in this CIP, I believe, try to keep it manageable, and especially in terms of the operating budget impact, which the council will be discussing next month. There were a number of projects discussed more specifically by the committee that are noted on the front of the packet, and staff is certainly willing to go into any detail that council members have with regard to any of those at this time.
All right, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I just wanted to, today is my day of, I guess, giving thanks. So I just want to thank you for your continued commitment to the Clarksburg community. For quite some time, we had made a promise to the Clarksburg community who are on failing septic, and our commitment to the environment and making sure that those failing septic systems weren't continuing to jeopardize the 10 Mile Creek area. And so I really want to thank you for continuing to roll up your sleeves and figure out a way in which we could fund this incredibly expensive but also incredibly needed project for the Clarksburg Historic District. But I also want to thank you for Damascus and putting that new project online, because a lot of people don't talk a lot about Damascus, another rural area that happens to be in my district, but one in which we know continues to have aging infrastructure as well. And although they may not be as vocal in terms of their advocacy and always be able to come out, they certainly need that infrastructure. And so to not forget about some of our folks in some of our more rural areas throughout the county and ensure that we're continuing to do what we need to speaks volumes and says something. And I really want to thank the committee chair and T&E for keeping something like this in the budget, understanding that they may not have gotten the knock on the door or the emails from the Damascus community, but understanding it was still something important to do. So thank you very much to all involved. It really does matter and makes a difference in people's lives.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Apologize for that somewhat disruptive conversation. I was just having a dialogue with the chair of the committee on one of the relevant issues, which I'll just begin with. I would like for the committee, the council, to review this issue of smart meters and the smart meter opt-out. My instinct is to support WSSC on the smart meter installations, but I understand that there's differences. We haven't really had a chance yet to kind of think it through and understand the implications. I think it'd be worth doing, but at the moment, I'm not aware that the council or the committee has a position. The chairman feels strongly about that, and that's, you know, it's a substantive point of view, and I think it's worth discussing. But I am personally, I have not had a chance to think about it. I don't, my instinct is to support smart infrastructure, but perhaps there's, you know, perhaps there's something I'm not aware of. I wanted to just talk about a different project briefly, which is very much related though, and that is the Littonsville property and the potential for WSSC to work with the county to facilitate the success of a vision that the county council established for the Littonsville area. And as you know very well, the Purple Line is coming through Littonsville, and the county went through a very, very extensive multi-year process of re-envisioning the future of that area and how to support new housing there while preserving affordable housing as well. And we came up with a very, very innovative approach, working in partnership with a private property owner and with WSSC, a private developer, and with WSSC. And we I think the council's vision is a big priority for the council, and we need your support to follow through and make it happen. So I was just curious if you could provide a quick update on the status of those discussions, and then perhaps we could return to that again in the next month or so, and get another status check so that we could ensure that the work that the council put in, that the community put in to imagining a future there can come to pass.
Good morning, Council. And for the record, my name is Joe Beach, Deputy General Manager for Administration. So, yes, we've been in discussions with both EYA and the Housing Opportunities Commission about the land swap that they have proposed for Littonsville. We have looked at some of the environmental issues there with our own existing property and how they might deal with that if they were to take it. But also, we have been evaluating the tower, I think it's the vertical bridge property across from the depot. There are some complications with that property in terms of a lot of the easements that have been recorded there. They do have an existing tower there that does create a lot of operational issues for WSSC. So we're have expressed those concerns to EYA and HOC. They have responded to that. We're going to continue to work through it. So they're not easy issues, but we're going to continue to work through it to see if it's something that can be resolved.
Okay, thank you. I would just appreciate it if we could kind of bear down and try to, knock this out and figure out what it's going to take to make that work. And I understand it's complicated, these things are, but it seems like we're very close. So if we could just keep at it until we get it done, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Councilmember Friedson?
I appreciate Councilmember Reamer bringing that up. I share that interest in that particular issue, and I want to make sure that this is a tremendous opportunity to realize the vision of Littonsville and to maximize the potential of the Purple Line, and I'm hopeful that that can move forward. But I also just wanted to take a point of personal privilege with Secretary Foster and my predecessor, Councilmember Dennis, and just thank you for your continued service, and I really do appreciate it, and appreciate the fact that you have a very bad sense of retirement, and so we appreciate being able to take advantage of your talents and you on a daily basis, fulfilling the idea that public service isn't a career choice, it's a calling, and continuing to answer that call to the benefit of our community. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank both of you for continuing to serve and continue to share your talents with us for the betterment of all of us. So thank you.
All right, well, great work by the T&E committee. Also do want to thank WSSC for everything that they do, and most certainly Commissioner Bayonet, Dennis, and Commissioner Foster, as well as Reed for her leadership on all of these complicated issues. But we're going to continue to work with you as partners. So so we do have a T&E recommendation. This is a straw vote. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now we're on to transportation, and that turn it over to Chairman Hucker. I believe that Dr. Orland is coming up. So
Thank
turn
you,
it over to
Madam
you.
President. Dr. Orland, welcome. Okay, the T&E committee concurred with the executive CIP amendments on 7 items, including additional bridge and culvert repair to keep those projects on schedule, funding the ongoing Bethesda Station South entrance, and eliminating the funding for Montrose Parkway East. The committee rejected the executive's proposed cuts to 2 WMATA-related items, the Forest Glen Passageway and the White Flint North entrance. The committee believes that both these projects are essential to enhancing transit access and pedestrian safety in the growing areas around the Red Line and enhancing our economic development that's planned in those communities as well. Those projects, we believe, have to remain on schedule, and we can't expect WMATA to cover all the costs in a reasonable time frame. The committee also voted to increase the funding for the BIPAs, the Bicycle Pedestrian Priority Area Improvements, by $1.5 million to complete ongoing projects in the program in FY20. The committee also voted to preserve the funding for the Bradley Boulevard Bikeway and Drainage Project, and we voted to preserve funding for sidewalk and curb repair because that program has been historically underfunded. We also voted to keep the Dorsey Mill Road Bridge project on schedule. The committee voted to postpone action, though, on the executive's proposed supplemental appropriation for street resurfacing until the CIP reconciliation in May. And finally, the committee discussed accelerating the design funding for BRT on Veers Mill Road, but we agreed to come back to that issue as well mid-year to determine the design funding schedule then. But we're all interested in that. Dr. Orlin.
Well, that was a really good summary. Did you want me to go through each project or just leave it the way it is?
Not necessarily. Do you have anything to add?
Just
mean
again,
to
just for
step
the
on your
record, you
remarks.
mentioned it, but there's a mistake on page 6. On the White Flint Metro Station North, I think I wrote that, in fact, I did write, the T&E committee recommended concurring with the executive. They did not. They recommended keeping it in the CIP on schedule. So I regret the error.
Tried to slip one by us there, Glenn.
No.
We saw that.
It wasn't a subconscious mistake. It was an unconscious mistake. Okay.
There's a big difference. Okay, with that, Madam President, we recommend passage 3-0.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Once again, keeping with my theme, I believe that we should thank folks when things are going well. I will say it's very interesting that the county executive, who's been a big proponent of BRT, would suggest delaying a project like this that is supposed to carry the BRT in Germantown, in a place where we don't have a lot of access to mass transit. And so from that perspective, while I do certainly understand that we have budget constraints, it just kind of befuddles me that, the county executive who on this council has been a big proponent of BRT along through 55 and making sure that we have access to mass transit options would then choose to delay something that is a part of the efficacy of the CCT. And so, again, I really appreciate the great work and the foresight of the T&E committee in keeping something like this on track. Oftentimes, you don't hear a lot about encouraging mass transit options in the up-county. And recently, we've heard our Mark Rails plan that we have, and there's now been a lot of resurgence of discussion about what can happen with the CCT in terms of reworking it. And so I really look forward to working hand in hand with our T&E committee, who obviously has a vision for ensuring that we can get more mass transit options for the up-county, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I'm really very enthusiastic about these committee recommendations. A lot of discussion in the community about the priorities here, and I think we came to a terrific place. And I just wanted to highlight, we did consider the possibility of accelerating the planning design money for BRT on Veers Mill. And we initially had a proposal to do that, not a recommendation, but a proposal to do that. And then in dialogue with MCDOT, they said that they would want us to hear about the relative cost benefit of 355 North. If I'm characterizing this, Glenn, correctly, maybe you can make sure I don't slip it up, but and so please don't accelerate it right yet. Give us a chance to come back to you a little later in the year with the two projects, because if we can't do them both, then we're going to have to pick one of them. And so, let us come back to you for that fuller conversation. So that's a fine place to leave it. Ideally, we can do both. We'll have to see if that's really possible. But I think it is. It's good that we're at least trying to drive the conversation forward here, and perhaps we must get one of these two projects into construction as soon as possible, as well as others. We've got the Route 29, the lower half of that project that we've got to get working on pretty soon when we get the design finished there too. So there's a lot that can be done on BRT in the next coming years.
All I'd add to that is that what DOT told us was that the project planning study for the whole 355 BRT, both north and south, will be at a point of where the executive can recommend the council can select a preferred alternative probably by sometime late spring. And so maybe this summer would be a time for you to consider another amendment to do either accelerate the Veers Mill Road or start doing the design for 355, whether it's north and south or both, or both of them, 355 and Veers Mill Road. I also want to just mention while I got the mic, in terms of the White Flint North Station, the most important thing is that WMATA is undertaking its refresh of the study they did in 2010. They're doing it right now. In fact, there's a meeting downtown right now that I'm missing because I'm here, looking over some of the options. And they should have by late summer a discrete set of alternatives for that northern entrance with cost estimates. And so you'll be in a position as a council to make a decision for the next CIP next year, which of those to fund, and then try to find the money to pay for it. So.
Councilmember Friedson?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councilmember Rice's comments. I appreciated the opportunity to join the T&E committee for this. I was very pleased to do that and pleased with the work of the committee. I want to appreciate Chairman Hucker and the committee for allowing me to join and fight for some really important projects in District 1, the White Flint Metro, as you have mentioned, but also significant improvements on Bradley Boulevard and Seven Locks Road, which have been long-awaited projects by the communities that are particularly important. So I appreciate that. It was disappointing that the recommended cuts were disproportionately in the transportation realm and also disproportionately affected District 1, I think, more than other districts and some important projects. So I'm glad that the committee dealt with their work with such thoughtfulness and thoroughness, and appreciated the opportunity to be there, and just wanted to thank you for your leadership, Chairman Hucker, and to the members of the committee for your work.
Okay, thank you also for that work. I really do appreciate the conversation about the Veers Mill BRT, and obviously whatever we can continue to do to see if we can get some Metro extra buses or anything to facilitate and enhance transportation and transit options in that corridor. In the meantime, I think it's something that we definitely have to pursue and continue to see where we are, but I do appreciate everything that the T&E committee has done for that thus far. And so with that, there is a recommendation. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. All right, so now we're on to parks, and we have Ms. Dunn, who is going to staff us. I know the Fed committee has looked at this. I also understand that Councilmember Friedson is the lead for parks, so I don't know how the chair wants to handle the report out, but I'll leave it over to
thank you. I will present the committee's recommendations and then turn it to Mr. Friedson, and he'll share anything he'd like to share. Okay, so just to step back for context, we were grappling with the need to reduce the expenditures in this budget, and overall, we did not recommend changes that would undo savings that had been proposed, right? We stuck to the mark as far as identifying savings for the capital budget. And that was a decision, that we were conscious of, because it would have been certainly more fun to simply reject all the cuts and say, let's continue to fund everything that we have planned. But we're concerned about making funding available in this capital budget for priorities like schools and transportation and housing and many other areas. And we felt that the cuts that had been non-recommended from the planning board were cuts that were acceptable, given the need to fund other priorities as well. So that is the basic background of what we did. We had a good discussion about athletic fields and CUPF and funding for athletic fields, and we talked a little bit about the incredible program that Parks has built over the last few years to build, renovate, and maintain natural grass And that is the priority in this county, is to provide high-quality natural grass playing surfaces wherever possible. And in order to do that, you have to have staff that knows a lot about turf maintenance and management. You have to have a lot of very expensive equipment, and you have to have a lot of careful planning about school sites and fields and how to rotate access to fields and make sure that kids still have a place to play when they go to a school and so forth. But we did just have a good conversation about all of those issues, and we kind of planted a flag that we're going to come back to in the budget context, which is we need to continue to expand our investments from CUPF into field renovation and natural grass renovation. In the affordability reconciliation, we recommended that we keep funding intact for the Josiah Henson Historic Park, for the Brookside Gardens Master Plan implementation improvements, for the Little Bennett Regional Park Trail Connector, and then we also recommended keeping funding on track for the Little Bennett Regional Day Use Area, but we felt that the Ovid Hazen Wells Park, we would reluctantly concur with the planning board to delay that project further. I will note that we received during our deliberations, and I apologize for missing it, a letter from the council member from the district, Mr. Rice, advocating that we keep that project intact and on track. I know he'll bring that up, I'm sure. And we also received a letter from the adjacent homeowners association, the Park Ridge Homeowners Association, actually advocating that we not accelerate the project and that we support the delay out of concern for redeveloping the park and bringing people and not having adequate road capacity there. So that is the state of our recommendation to the full committee. Pam, did I miss anything there?
No, good morning. I don't think so. I think you covered it all. Coming out of the planning board, there were 4 amendments recommended. The county executive supported 2 of the 4 and then made slight modifications to the other 2. And then the biggest change from what came out of the planning board from the county executive was the recommendation for this $1.45 million reconciliation PDF, which Councilmember Reimers just explained. So that about covers it. But park staff is here. They can answer any questions related to, the least of the decisions to reduce that funding, which landed on the Ovid Hazen Wells Park funding being shifted.
So we can turn to parks. Okay, any comments you'd like to share?
Thank you, Mike Riley, Parks Director. I'd just like to speak first briefly to the ball field program. And as you alluded, we have begun over the last several years, again, taking on school fields to renovate them and then take them into our maintenance program. As of today, we currently maintain 107 of 197 elementary and middle school sites. So that means there's 90 out there that we have not renovated and that we don't maintain. The majority of those are still under MCPS maintenance. There's some adoptive fields and unique arrangements. But,
let me pause you there, because this is an important point. There's a reason why you don't maintain fields that you haven't renovated yet. Can you just explain that?
Sure. It's all to give them a chance to sustain healthy turf. Most of the fields at MCPS sites that we have not renovated are hard pan. They're native soil that may have been a staging area for the project when the school was built. The soil is usually terribly compacted. It does not drain well internally or on the surface. And if you don't go in and amend the soil, dig it up, have appropriate root zone soil and grade it for drainage, you really don't stand a chance of sustaining natural grass on that.
So in order for parks to maintain a school field, you need to spend several $10,000s of dollars to build the field up to maintainable, condition. and then you'll take it over. So there's a queue to work our way through that. I know a lot of parents say, why can't Parks just, come in with the mowers and make this field look the way that other fields might look? And the reality is you have to spend some capital dollars investing in that in order to embark upon that.
Yes, and over the last 4 years, we have been benefiting from fund balance from communities to public facilities, which was money by and large generated from user fees for school fields, has been coming to the Parks Department in our CIP, and we use that to renovate the fields. And one of the recommendations in this packet, we had asked to continue that program in FY20 at $500,000, which would bring about an additional 5 school sites into our fold. And the recommendation is to defer that decision until the operating budget, which is fine, but I just ask for your support during the operating budget to continue that program. The other thing you talked about, Ovid Hayes and Wells, this was the affordability PDF from the executive. It's 1.45 million. At that magnitude, we have to look at our big geo-bonded standalone projects. One thing that I have implored the planning board over the last years that they have supported is not to nickel and dime our level of effort projects like Pilar and trail renovation and the projects that allow us just to keep the current system up. When we have these type of cuts, we have to go to the larger standalone projects. And they're all very important. As you alluded to, it's kind of an exercise where we look at relative importance. And as much as we hate to ding or defer Ovid Hayes and Wells, it's a great project. That was the one we decided that we would slide back a year to create this kind of capacity in the CIP. We do have, if the council is interested, we do have some slides. If I don't presume all the council members know what this project is or what it's about, so we certainly can respond if you'd like to see that. And then the last thing I'll close with that Pam didn't mention specifically was the executive changed our request for the allocation in the park for the park improvement payment in Bethesda.
Right.
We had asked for a little bit more. The executive recommended a little bit less. I really don't see that as a problem because generally as those payments come in, because it's non-tax supported money, if some of the needs arise sooner than later, we'll simply come back to you for a supplemental appropriation. But just to put that in context, I know that particular Councilmember Friedson had asked for some information about the PIP. Just in the next 6 years, based on projected acquisitions and development projects we think could happen that would benefit from the PIP, we're at about $46 million over 6 years. Just
Really?
to give you kind of an issue of magnitude of if that money materializes, that's the kind of money we think we would need. Right now, we're just getting an appropriation of 10, but as the additional projects come in that would fund that, we're certainly going to come back to you for appropriation. And the last one that is really not in the park CIP that was discussed was the Wall Park Garage. There seems to still be widespread support for that great project to go forward when the Gables development goes forward. And I see the executive has basically said if the project goes forward sooner than later, and again, that would be supported through a change in the CIP through supplemental appropriation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for reminding me about the park impact payment in Bethesda. We did have some discussion about what is happening there now relating to the vision of turning the parking lots into parks, the big surface parking lots, and we're eagerly awaiting some more information. The executive branch is in close discussion now with property owners and developers adjacent to those parking lots about coming up with a way to partially fund the construction of a significant park. I think the focus right now is a very significant park adjacent to the Bethesda Farm Women's Market. So this is really fulfilling the vision of the Bethesda sector plan on the front end of the development cycle, which is very exciting if we can make that happen. I think we're very, very close and hopeful that we will hear some positive news and we'll have the committee take that up very soon. Thank you.
I'm going to turn over to Councilmember Friedson since he's the lead for Parks.
Thank you for that. Thank you to Chairman Reamer for a great summary, and I won't reiterate. I appreciate you coming. You answered my questions that we had, and before I had a chance to ask them. So thank you for that, Director Riley. I did want to just reiterate a couple points because we had significant discussion on this. One, the ball fields and the interest that we reiterated, which has been the commitment of the council, the prior council, and I think continues certainly to be the commitment of our committee, that we move as many of the ball fields as we can as is practicable, understanding the natural constraints that they can't, this process doesn't happen overnight, and it requires a commitment on our end to fund it. But we reiterated that commitment to move these fields as much as we can, understanding that it requires the remediation as described earlier, but I think long-term it's in everybody's best interest. I think the comment that I made at the committee was at the end of the game, you want to put the ball in your best player's hands, and Parks is our best player when it comes to taking care of ball fields. And so, our school system is terrific, but taking care of ball fields is not their core competency. Parks, that is the core competency, and it just makes sense in the sake of quality and cost effectiveness to do that and to move in that direction. And then I'm glad you brought up Wall Park and the PIP, which we talked extensively about. I think that I reiterated, and I will reiterate again, the idea of the PIP, which is terrific. And kudos to Chairman Anderson for really shepherding this idea through the master plan process, and it is bearing fruit and demonstrating the benefit that we get when development activity is happening, that we can leverage that into green space in downtown Bethesda in our urban areas. But want to make sure that we also remember that the idea of this money is to be not to be replacement funds, but to be supplementary funds. And so we need to make sure that we're investing it in a thoughtful way, but also that this isn't exclusively the fund source for downtown Bethesda's open space and park improvements and park acquisitions. And so, I hope that we can maintain that. And I'm glad to hear from the executive branch, because I have heard conflicting information about Wall Park, that there's a commitment from the executive branch that will be funded as it comes online, because that's if we miss it, it's gone situation. And I know my colleague, Councilmember Albornoz, who has worked extensively on this, can speak to that. This was a carefully crafted deal that was made with a private developer, and the need to build a parking garage and turning that surface lot into green space, which is a commitment that we should have in all of our urban areas. And we want to make sure that we are ready to show up with our end of the bargain and to operate in good faith to make sure that we don't miss these opportunities. So I appreciate that as well. And with that, I will just thank you for your work, and thank the committee and the chairman for his leadership.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you to the Fed committee. We've just talked about the up-county all this morning and some of the great things that we've been doing to try and get ourselves on track. And this is one where I think we continue playing the same game over and over again about promising our Clarksburg community what we're going to deliver them in terms of a fully completed park and then taking it away. I feel as though Clarksburg is the Charlie Brown when it comes to this park. It really is one in which I think that, again, we continue to develop in Clarksburg. Clarksburg has grown from what was 2,000 residents in 2002 to over 20,000. When we look at what's coming online, when it comes to the Cabin Branch area, we're slated to have 40,000 residents in Clarksburg. And if we can't say that we're going to deliver on them their quality park that they should have in that Clarksburg area to serve the center of Clarksburg, then I don't know how we can say that we're truly delivering quality parks to our communities. We can say we're delivering to some of our communities, but not to the fastest growing region in the county that continues to have this promise snatched away repeatedly. it's frustrating. And it's one in which, I'm in my last term here on the council. And there are a lot of things that I've been able to achieve for my district. This is one in which I've been working hand in hand. And I know, Mr. Rowley, this isn't something that you chose to do. This isn't something that you wanted to do. I know that the planning department has been continually supportive in terms of that we need to move this project forward and understand the value and importance of this. As I'm about to go out to Katz of Clarksburg, I can promise you that my constituency will ask me, so when is our park going to be finished? I hate to keep telling them I don't know. That's not fair to them. They pay taxes just like everybody else does. It's not fair to them to continue to say, oh, we're on track. I just read a press release I was looking back through, and we highlighted in 2016 about Ovid Hazen Wells. We actually highlighted it in our press release from the county council. And so now here we are saying, no, just kidding. We're not going to actually deliver that to you. This isn't acceptable in my eyes, and I think that we need to continue to deliver on this project in a timely manner. And so I'd like to ask for and make a motion that we actually restore the Ovid Hazen Wells Recreational Park to the existing current funding, and ask for a second.
All right, so there's been a motion and a second. Going to move on to Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Want to begin by congratulating Chairman Anderson on completing his odyssey of visiting all 400 urban parks in Montgomery County. That was a tremendous effort, and I think a testament to highlighting what a wonderful amenity and the importance of these parks to those communities. So thank you for that effort. And I also want to acknowledge Director Riley and his outstanding team. I am intimately familiar with their work and just want to express my appreciation on the dais here for that dedication and underscore, as my colleagues have mentioned, what a great job you guys have done in so many areas, but in particular with the field issue. It is a heavy lift. It is a challenging issue, to say the least, because of our typography and because of our climate and because of the geography here in Montgomery County. And I've been very impressed with your staff's dedication in that space, and I think you're making great strides. Wanted to just highlight a couple of things. I think the Parks Department has also done an outstanding job in actively seeking public-private partnerships, and I think that's a way for us to address the capital needs that the county will not ever be in a position to fully fund on its own. And I want to highlight one in particular, and that's the partnership at Warner Circle Park. If you could comment on that and the status of that project. I know a number of my residents in Kensington are particularly interested, and if you care to comment, and I've got a couple of other comments as well.
Sure.
Please press your button.
I'm sorry. The home of the founder of Kensington. It's in my neighborhood, and as you know, we acquired that more than a decade ago. There's been multiple attempts to find a use and fund source to restore that historic mansion that have not succeeded, but we have renewed optimism now. We've signed a letter of intent with a company called Washington Landmark Construction, whose vision is to turn the historic manor house and the carriage house into condominiums. The grounds would remain a public park, but the building itself would become condos. We've shared that with stakeholders in the town of Kensington. There seems to be widespread public support for this alternative so far. And we're now in a stage where we really need to negotiate the specifics of what that transaction would look like with the third party.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Just two other points. One, we had a great meeting recently, and Councilmember Hucker had staff there as well, to meet with MCCC PTA to talk about partnerships moving forward to establish more defined volunteer opportunities to help continue to maintain parks, particularly those associated with school properties, in a creative fashion, because once we've made the initial investment to convert the fields to a better condition, there are still obviously the challenges of ongoing operating expenses. And so I would encourage us to continue to find solutions just like that through volunteerism, and our incredible PTA community that has expressed a willingness to step forward and assist in those efforts. So I commend you for being open to that, and also my colleagues in MCPS as well, because I think that's a good model moving forward. And then two last points, just to put a quick small plug in. In addition to the great partnership in field management within MCPS, we didn't quite crack this code while I was at Recreation, but I do think it would make a lot of sense for parks to take over the field maintenance of recreation facilities as well. There's an economies of scale, and the White Oak, the brand new White Oak Community Recreation Center, has a field that is overly loved. And the Recreation Department does its best to maintain that field, but I think that the Parks Department would undeniably be in a better position. And there are other fields that are affiliated within the county as well, not just owned by managed by the Recreation Department, but other sister county agencies. And so I think this is a project that, taken to scale, would really have long-term benefits. And then finally, I just want to associate myself with the comments of my colleague, Councilmember Rice. I couldn't agree more with the need to update the park at Ovenhazen Wells, which would make the great name of a microbrew, actually. But I do think that this is a park that is long overdue in its renovation. I know there are a number of people that have expected it, purchased their homes looking forward to having that amenity, and there are a number of young families in that neighborhood who would greatly benefit from the redevelopment of that park. And so I will support the motion that my colleague, Councilmember Rice, has made.
Okay, so actually, why don't we go ahead and take up that that motion that has been seconded by Council Vice President Katz. There any comments on that particular motion? Councilmember Reamer.
Great. I mean, I don't have, the committee sought to recommend to the council how to fulfill the vision of cutting from the capital budget. The council can very well reject that recommended cut, but at the end of the day, it's going to go into the pile of complicated trade-offs that the council president will really lead us through forming a capital budget. So I don't mean to say it's all on the council president's shoulders. That's not really what I'm saying, but I'm saying we are going to make her job more difficult if we reject this. So I think it's, I totally understand Mr. Rice's motion and his advocacy here. I'm not going to support the motion, but if the council wants to recommend otherwise, that's fine. It's just, it's not going to be easy to fit everything back together. Some things are going to have to give, and so that's just something to keep in mind. And as to the issue of up-county infrastructure, I think I take comfort in keeping Little Bennett Regional Day Use Area, which is a significant park that is in the area, on track, as well as the Little Bennett Regional Park Trail Connector, which is a crucial connection for one side of the region to get to the other in the park system. So, we are keeping on track two very important park infrastructure investments.
All right, so all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. And that would be Councilmember Glass, Jawando Hucker, myself, Councilmember Katz, Councilmember Rice, and Councilmember Albornoz. All those opposed? Councilmember Reamer and Councilmember Friedson. Okay, so that passes. And then we'll have to figure out the magic of how we might be able to make that work. But as we do every single year, it's all about reconciliation, and sometimes things happen and sometimes they don't. But it's good to consider it and see where we can end up. Councilmember Hucker.
Madam President, as you know, we make the magic happen every year.
Of course.
Right here.
Right here. Every single hour.
Every day, that's right. I know it's a capital budget hearing, but since I don't see you all often enough, let me just ask for a couple quick updates. As you know, the ban on cancer-causing pesticides passed way back in 2015. I remember you had concerns about being covered with the ban at that point, and so we acceded to your request of having just a pilot program at 5 pesticide-free parks. Can you tell us the status? I know we've gone back and forth a little bit on email, but there are a lot of people concerned about this, and I'd love to hear an update on the status of the RFP and when you'll select a vendor. Thank you.
We did structure that to be that pilot to compare the organic care of 5 fields to the IPM care of 5 fields. We put out an RFP to have one entity take care of this and then do the comparative analysis. Proposals have come in. It's in a procurement stage. It's under evaluation. I anticipate being able to share with the council and the public the results of that evaluation in a week or two.
A week or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the work has been done? Is that what that means?
No, they'll select a vendor in a week or two. The work has not been done yet. And then how long will the work take?
Well, the pilot goes on. The pilot was to go on
Right.
for years.
Right.
To collect data to evaluate the efficacy of each of the methods of maintenance.
Can you be any more specific?
About the
years. I just
It
it's
was
hard-
3. It was 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd also let me just follow up on our communication late last year about my request that parks immediately discontinue the use of Roundup and other products with glyphosate in them in our parks. There's been, since we passed the bill in 2015, there were already a lot of concerns and a lot of scientific studies about the dangers of Roundup, but there's even more since we've passed the legislation. We talked about it in T&E back in September, and I sent you that letter, and you were nice enough to respond to the letter I sent in November. In your letter, you said, Mike, you'd put together a team of internal subject matter experts to better understand the risks, impacts, and costs, and put together adopted a moratorium through the middle of March. So thank you for that. The moratorium ends March 18th, 6 days from now, and you said you'd get a detailed response back to me early in the new year. So I'm wondering if you could provide the response.
It's on my desk.
The response is on your
I will
desk?
be getting a written response back to you before the end of the week.
Can you give
But
us
as
any
you
clue what
stated,
it says? What's the status of the moratorium?
When you asked me to look at discontinuing the use of Roundup, since we were not going to be using Roundup over the winter months, I did reply that there would be no Roundup applications throughout the winter months. But I have recommendations from my team. As you know, it's a very complex issue. You asked me to seek guidance from my legal counsel on liability issues, which I have, and I have a response and draft on my desk that I'll get to you by the end of this week.
Okay. I bet my colleagues would like a little. Can you just clue us in on what the response is? You must know what the letter says.
I actually have it on my desk in draft form. I would rather not say what it says before I have a chance to review what my staff has provided me and put it in writing.
Okay.
But I will say that I do have, we just talked about the expertise I have in sports turf management. I've got legal advice. I've got advice from our IPM experts. So I'm not trying to be evasive. I'm just saying I have a lot of different content in front of me, and I have to make a few decisions that I'm not comfortable putting forth publicly at this moment.
Okay. I imagine there might be people who think that that's an evasive answer, but I'll forward to you. I look forward to the letter, and I'll forward to you a new study that came out in Science Direct just last month that showed that exposure to Roundup increased the cancer risk, particularly of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, of people exposed to it by 41%. And that's only the latest of a raft of scientific evidence about the risks borne not just by our park staff, but of course by babies and toddlers that use the park whose brains and bodies are still developing, who are very susceptible to the impact of pesticides, to pregnant women who frequent the park, to pets that use the park as well. So anyway, I really look forward to your response because I know you're going to be taking this seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Hucker, for raising this issue. Director Riley, I would just ask, as long as my colleague's okay with it, I'd love to see the letter. Yeah, you know, and I think we all, okay, we should all see it. So if you could just CC us all, that would be great.
Absolutely.
I won't go through you don't have to, I won't ask you to tell us anything. Review it and get it to us. I think we're all interested to know this is a complicated issue. There's a lot of legal and health ramifications, which Councilmember Hucker mentioned. Also, obviously, just maintaining the fields in the proper way. So eager to see that. I also was not going to mention this, but I will since it was raised by my colleague, Councilmember Albanaz, the issue of taking care of the recreational fields as well. I just did a town hall with Senator Smith with the African immigrant community at the White Oak Rec Center, and we have that field is in horrible shape. It's a disgrace, frankly, that over 200 mostly black and immigrant and Latino and African American kids can't play on that field. And I know it's not your current responsibility, but we have to figure that out. I walked on it along with Councilmember Hucker's chief of staff, Dave Coons, who was there for the town hall. So we just need to figure that out, and I think sooner rather than later, because that's a high, as Councilmember Albanaz mentioned, that's a high demand field. I'm sure there's others. So I just wanted to flag that for you as well. And my staff will be following up.
We will look at it.
Councilmember Reamer.
Great. So we'll be hearing from you shortly about your internal review, including your own risk assessment. It does certainly seem to me that there is risk in the person who is applying the chemical. You know, that's what we've seen is that the employee who is charged with, using these chemicals is that's something where the employer has to really be very careful. And it's an exposure level issue that perhaps there is a significant causation for people who are spraying this chemical constantly. The lawsuit from California, there was a poor man who was really victimized by his employer and was applying this chemical for 8 hours a day for years without any safety equipment, as I read in the news accounts. So that's obviously very unacceptable. The question of whether the chemical can be used at all is a different question, and I haven't seen any studies that say that no exposure, that there isn't a way to use it in a very targeted manner. So if there's evidence out there to support that that you shouldn't use it in that way, I'd like to see it. We'll take a look at what you say. One concern I have is that the alternatives are even worse. That the chemicals you might treat weeds with in the creeks, for example, if you're not allowed to use Roundup, then the chemicals that are an alternative to Roundup are even more toxic. So that's certainly something I've heard from some of those organizations that do weed removal. So there's no easy answers here, that's for sure. But I look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Thanks.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. Director Riley, thank you for the conversation. Look forward to reading the letter along with my colleagues. Quick question regarding the RFP and the pilot program that will begin in earnest. What are the locations where these pilot sites will be? Have you identified those parks?
Tell you offhand, but the 10 fields are identified in the RFP, which is a public document.
Okay, I'll take a look. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any more lights. So with that, all those in favor of the parks.
Could I,
I'm sorry.
pardon me, I have one more
Yes.
thing. I need to circle back to the council. In making the amendment to retain the funding for Ovid Hazen Wells on the schedule that it was originally set at, on page 3 of the staff report, you'll see that there was a shift in funding for the Brookside Gardens implementation that moved it forward slightly when making that shift to Ovid Hazen Wells. And so if you're returning Ovid Hazen Wells to its original funding schedule, I just want to put out there that will then move that schedule back for Brookside Gardens implementation just 1 year. I just want to make sure that that's clear to the council and everyone is on board with that.
Well, that is a new wrinkle. I don't think that is the way it usually works. We kind of go through reconciliation and we figure out where we are. So that's just one option, but that's not the way that we usually address the budgets. So we will be looking at all the options.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make it clear, because it is in the report that they're shifting funding to do one for the other, and I just wanted you to have that information, that in making that decision, how that impacts that shift. That's all.
So can we have that clarified? Because as long as I've been on the council, we don't do one for one
Yeah, I mean,
changes. We look at the
that
totality
is
of.
what the planning board recommended, and
Right.
so if you want to both add Ovid Hazen Wells back and
Yeah.
continue
Yeah.
to accelerate Brookside, I believe that will actually be higher than what the commission
Right.
originally submitted, but I'm looking
Right.
at nodding heads and thinking that is your intent.
Yeah, I don't think the amendment as it was proposed specifically stated that in order to do this, we would then delay Brookside Garden. All it did was add it, and then when we go through our reconciliation process, we will have to figure out how that might work out. Okay. All right, thank you. So with that, all those in favor of adopting this recommendation as amended, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are now to item 7, and this is action on ZTA 19-02, clinics limited use. Fed committee recommended enactment to enact it as amended. And I do want to thank the Fed committee for their recommendation. I also want to thank Councilmember Rice, who is a co-sponsor on this ZTA, and want to mention that we did have testimony from Ms. Jean Wei, Mohammed Nadeem Ahmad, Jawad Bashir, Reverend Mansfield Casey Caseman, and Salim Akhtar, and also heard and want to thank those who have requested this ZTA, Mr. Ansar Bernie and Abdul Sheikh. I think it's so important for us to constantly look at ways that we can expand access to healthcare here in Montgomery County, and especially when our faith-based communities step forward, in this case, the Muslim community. So I do appreciate the work that went into the ZTA and the fact that, as amended, it would take place, it would be effective immediately. So thank you, Chairman Reamer, for your work. Councilmember Rice.
Madam Chair, I just very briefly want to thank you for your leadership in this role, understanding that we have a lot of underserved communities where we don't have great access to medical and dental, and so certainly providing flexibility for us to be able to do so in a lot of areas that oftentimes are the East County and some areas in the Up County, as well as others, are certainly ones in which make sense for us, don't harm our communities, because they are assets and needed areas where we can continue to address the health disparities that we continue to see. So I really just want to thank you for your leadership, and I'm happy to be a partner with you on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer, you're the chair.
I think you've summarized it nicely. This is going to allow an important community institution to deepen its services and support the community. So appreciate your introducing this, and we're glad to support it at committee.
All right. Anything you want to add, Ms. Dunn?
No, the summary is on point, that ZTA 1902 is really about adding medical and dental clinics into some of the residential zones, but only as an accessory use to other institutional uses such as religious assembly, daycare, residential care facilities, and charitable and philanthropic institutions. It is not a huge change to the code, but obviously a very beneficial one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I don't see any lights, so I believe that this is a roll call.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Tawando?
Yes.
Mr. Tawando votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice?
Yes.
Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes, and that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, we are going to adjourn, but we will be meeting with the Regional Services Center directors at 12:30 in the 6th floor River Room, and that's a brown bag lunch. Thank you.